San Diego International Airport, Terminal 2. It's Christmas Eve, and the terminal is filled with families wrapped in joy and reunion, except one. In the boarding line stands Claire Cohen, 29 years old, blonde, simply dressed, carrying a worn-out backpack, shoulders squared, and a silence that speaks louder than any words ever could. Beside her are her parents, elegant, cold, impatient. Her father leans in, his voice sharp and bitter. "Don't embarrass us, Claire." She doesn't respond, just smiles. The kind of smile shaped by years of quiet survival. As they reach the security checkpoint, a tall, uniformed guard scans the crowd until his eyes lock on hers. He straightens, salutes sharply, and says, loud enough for the entire terminal to hear, "Rear Admiral Cohen, this way, please." Time freezes. Passengers turn. Her parents are stunned. But this isn't just a story about rank or titles. It's about years of silence, impossible choices, and battles fought far from home. It's about the moment a daughter stops seeking pride in others' eyes and finally learns to be proud of herself. Watch Claire's journey unfold and witness the moment silence becomes power. Subscribe for more stories that move, surprise, and inspire. Chapter 1: The Invisible Admiral. San Diego International Airport hummed with holiday energy. Terminal 2 was a canvas of emotional reunions, families embracing, children squealing, lovers reuniting under the warm California December sun that streamed through the massive windows. Christmas Eve had transformed the sterile airport architecture into something almost sacred, a place of homecomings. Almost everyone was smiling. Almost. In the premium check-in line stood the Cohen family, an island of tension amid the sea of joy. Claire Cohen, 29, stood slightly apart from her parents, her blonde hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She wore no makeup, just faded jeans, a simple navy sweater, and worn-out leather boots. A battered backpack hung from one shoulder, looking as though it had witnessed more of the world than most people ever would. Her parents, on the other hand, were immaculate. Eleanor Cohen, 63, wore a camel hair coat that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her silver-streaked dark hair arranged in a perfect bob. Her diamond earrings caught the light as she checked her watch for the third time in 5 minutes. Richard Cohen, 65, stood ramrod straight in his tailored charcoal suit, his salt and pepper hair combed meticulously, a Rolex gleaming on his wrist. His jaw worked back and forth as though he were chewing on words he was trying not to say. "The line is moving too slowly," Eleanor sighed, adjusting her designer handbag. "We'll miss the lounge at this rate." Claire didn't respond. She had learned long ago that these comments weren't meant for her. They were just her mother's way of narrating her displeasure to the universe. "We wouldn't be in this situation if someone had taken the direct flight I booked originally," Richard said, his voice a precise instrument designed to cut. He didn't look at Claire when he spoke. Claire's eyes remained fixed on the floor. 20 years of practice had taught her exactly what to do. Nothing. Say nothing, feel nothing, react to nothing. It was easier that way. She felt her father lean closer, his cologne, expensive, assertive, filling her space. "Don't embarrass us, Claire," he whispered, his voice carrying the bitter edge she knew all too well. "Your mother's friends from the foundation are on this flight. Try to look like you belong in first class, for once." Claire lifted her eyes just enough to see a muscle jumping in her father's jaw, the telltale sign of his disappointment. She offered a small, tired smile in return, not in defiance, but from exhaustion. The weight of never being enough was something she had carried for so long that it had become almost comfortable, like a backpack filled with stones that you forget you're wearing until someone points it out. "I'll do my best, Dad," she said quietly, her voice carrying a calm that surprised even her. The words were automatic, a script they had performed countless times. The line inched forward toward the security checkpoint. TSA agents moved with practiced efficiency, scanning boarding passes, checking IDs, directing the holiday travelers through the labyrinth of ropes and scanners. She felt something shift in the air. A tall TSA officer at the premium lane, African-American, mid-40s, with shoulders that filled out his uniform impressively, was scanning the faces in line. There was something different about his posture, a certain alertness that seemed out of place even for security personnel. His eyes moved methodically across the travelers until they landed on Claire. For a moment, something flickered across his face, recognition, then what appeared to be surprise. He straightened his spine even more, if that was possible. Claire's eyes felt her stomach tighten. She hadn't expected to be recognized here. Not now. Not with them. The officer walked purposefully toward their section of the line. Eleanor nudged Richard, probably assuming they were about to be moved ahead due to their status. Instead, the officer stopped directly in front of Claire. He brought his hand up in a sharp salute, his expression transforming into one of deep respect. "Rear Admiral Cohen, this way, please, ma'am." The world seemed to stop. Around them, conversations paused mid-sentence, heads turned. A pocket of silence expanded outward like a ripple in still water. Richard and Eleanor Cohen froze, their faces a matched set of shock and confusion. Eleanor's hand went to her throat, clutching her pearls in a gesture so stereotypical it would have been comical in any other circumstance. Richard began, automatically assuming the title was meant for him. "Ma'am," the officer repeated, looking directly at Claire. "We have an escort waiting for you. If you'll follow me, please." Claire stood perfectly still for 3 heartbeats, feeling the weight of every eye in the vicinity. Then, with a grace born of military precision, she nodded once. "Thank you, Officer Taylor," she said, reading his nameplate. "I appreciate the courtesy, but I'm traveling with my family today." Her voice was different now, clear, authoritative, but kind. Officer Taylor nodded in understanding. "Of course, Admiral. We can accommodate your entire party. The Admiral's Lounge has been notified of your arrival." Eleanor's mouth opened and closed without sound. Richard's face had drained of all color, the realization dawning in his eyes like a slow, painful sunrise. Claire adjusted her backpack strap and turned to her parents. For the first time in years, perhaps ever, she looked directly into her father's eyes without flinching away. "Shall we?" she asked simply. As Officer Taylor led them toward a private security lane, Claire walked 3 steps ahead of her parents. Her posture had changed, shoulders squared, chin lifted, not in arrogance, but with the quiet confidence of someone who had earned their place in the world. Behind her, she could hear her mother's whispered, "Richard, what is happening?" and her father's stunned silence in response. Claire hadn't planned for this moment. She had never sought vindication or a dramatic reveal. But as they walked through the terminal past curious onlookers and respectful nods from uniformed personnel, she felt something unfamiliar unfurling in her chest. It wasn't pride exactly. It was something quieter, more profound. The knowledge that sometimes the truth reveals itself in its own time, in its own way. And sometimes that revelation happens in the most unexpected places, like Terminal 2 of San Diego International Airport on Christmas Eve, in front of the parents who never thought you would amount to anything at all.
Before we continue to Chapter 2, I'd love to hear your thoughts on Claire's story. What challenges do you think she faced to become a Rear Admiral without her family's knowledge? Subscribe to the channel to make sure you don't miss the next chapter, where we'll discover the years of silence that led to this moment, and what happens when the Cohen family reaches the Admiral's lounge. Your subscription means the world to us as we continue bringing these powerful stories of redemption and recognition to life. Chapter 2: The Weight of Stars. The Admiral's Lounge at San Diego International Airport was a study of understated luxury. Soft leather seating, muted lighting, and the gentle hum of discreet conversations created an atmosphere of privilege and privacy. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the tarmac, where planes taxied against the backdrop of a cloudless California sky. Officer Taylor escorted the Cohen family through the exclusive entrance, where two naval officers in dress blues stood at attention. Their faces remained professionally neutral, but their eyes tracked Claire as she entered. "Admiral Cohen," the female officer said, stepping forward with a crisp salute. "Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez, it's an honor to meet you, ma'am. We weren't informed you'd be traveling through San Diego today." Claire returned the salute with practiced precision. "At ease, Lieutenant Commander. This is a personal trip. I'm not here in an official capacity." Richard and Eleanor Cohen lingered awkwardly behind their daughter. Their usual social confidence evaporated. Eleanor's fingers nervously adjusted her pearl necklace, while Richard's face had settled into a rigid mask. "Of course, ma'am," Rodriguez responded. "We've prepared a private section for you and your—" She glanced briefly at the elder Cohens. "Family." "Thank you," Claire said. She turned to Officer Taylor. "And thank you for your assistance, officer." He nodded respectfully. "My brother served under your command on the Lincoln, ma'am. He said you were the finest officer he'd ever met." A small, genuine smile crossed Claire's face. "Please give him my regards." As Officer Taylor departed, Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez led them to a secluded alcove overlooking the runways. A server appeared almost immediately with a tray of refreshments. "Admiral, can I get you your usual?" the server asked. Claire's eyebrows lifted slightly. "You know my preference?" The server smiled. "Black coffee, no sugar. Admiral Westfield mentioned it when he was through last month. Said you ran the tightest ship in the Pacific Fleet on nothing but black coffee and sheer determination." A quiet laugh escaped Claire. "That sounds like James." She gestured to her parents. "My parents might prefer something stronger." Once they were seated with their drinks, black coffee for Claire, scotch for Richard, white wine for Eleanor, and the naval officers had tactfully withdrawn to a respectful distance, the silence between the three Cohens expanded like a living thing. Eleanor was the first to break. "Claire," she whispered, leaning forward, her manicured fingers trembling around her wineglass. "What is all this? Some kind of joke?" Claire took a slow sip of her coffee. "No, Mom. Not a joke." "But they called you, they said—" Eleanor's voice faltered. "Rear Admiral," Claire supplied calmly. 2-star.
Richard set his untouched scotch down with deliberate control. "That's impossible," he said flatly. "You're 29. 34, actually," Claire corrected. "My birthday was in August." Eleanor blinked rapidly. "But you told us—" "I stopped correcting you 5 years ago when you kept getting it wrong," Claire said, not unkindly. "It seemed easier." Richard's jaw tightened. "This is absurd. You work in some kind of government office, administrative something." Claire looked out at the tarmac, watching a plane lift into the clear blue sky. "I said I worked for the government. You assumed administrative." A heavy silence fell again. Through the windows, the California sun cast long shadows across the airport grounds. In the distance, the Pacific Ocean glimmered like a promise. "When did you join the Navy?" Eleanor finally asked, her voice small. "After MIT. I was 22. Richard's head snapped up. "MIT? You went to San Diego Community College." Claire met his gaze steadily. "I transferred to MIT after my first year.
full scholarship. The shock on her father's face might have been comical in another context. "That's not possible. We would have known." "Would you?" Claire asked quietly. "You and Mom were in Europe that summer. When I called to tell you, your assistant said you were too busy to be disturbed." Eleanor pressed her fingers to her throat. "But surely we would have—" "The graduation announcement was sent to your house, the one in the Hamptons. You were in Bali that month." Richard's face had gone from pale to flushed. "This is ridiculous. I would remember my own daughter graduating from MIT. Claire nodded, not in agreement, but in resignation. "You've always had an excellent memory for the things that matter to you, Dad." The server approached with fresh drinks, then retreated quickly, sensing the tension. 12 years, Claire said after another long silence. Naval intelligence initially, then strategic command, specialized in cybersecurity and nuclear deterrence strategy. Eleanor's hand fluttered to her throat. Nuclear? "I was promoted to captain at 30, youngest woman in naval history." A small, distant smile crossed Claire's face. "There was an article in the Washington Post. I sent a clipping to your Christmas card that year." Richard's eyes narrowed. "We never received any."
"The Admiral promotion came 8 months ago," Claire continued, as though he hadn't spoken, "after this South China Sea operation." She paused. "That one was classified. Still is, mostly." Richard pushed his scotch away untouched, his lawyer's mind clearly struggling to reconcile the daughter he thought he knew with the woman sitting across from him. "Why didn't you tell us?" he demanded, an edge of anger cutting through his confusion. For the first time, Claire's composure wavered slightly. She looked down at her coffee cup, studying its simple white surface as if it might contain answers. "I did tell you," she said softly. "I tried. For years." Outside, the sun had begun its descent toward the horizon, casting the airport in a golden glow. A commercial airliner took off, its engines roaring with promise and possibility. "When I made lieutenant, I called home. 3 times. Left messages." Claire's voice remained steady, but something in her eyes had changed. "When I made lieutenant commander, I sent a letter. When I made commander, I tried again. And again for captain." She looked up, meeting her father's gaze directly. After a while, it seemed unnecessary. Eleanor dabbed at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. "But sweetheart, we would have been so proud." Claire's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Would you, Mom? Really?" The question hung in the air between them, honest and painful. Richard cleared his throat. "We should have tried harder to tell you, Claire. We're busy people, important people. You can't expect us to—" "Dad," Claire interrupted, her voice gentle but firm. "I've commanded a destroyer with a crew of 329. I've led joint task forces with international allies. I've briefed presidents." She paused. "I stopped expecting anything a long time ago." Richard's mouth snapped shut, his retort dying on his lips. A naval officer approached their table, stopping at a respectful distance. "Admiral Cohen, sorry to interrupt, ma'am. There's a secure call for you from Pacific Command." Claire nodded. "Thank you, Lieutenant. I'll be right there." She stood, smoothing her simple sweater. In that moment, despite her civilian clothes, she was unmistakably military. Her posture, her presence, the quiet authority that seemed to surround her like an aura. "Excuse me," she said to her parents. "This will only take a moment." As she walked away, following the lieutenant to a private communications room, Eleanor turned to Richard, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Our daughter! Richard, our daughter is—" Richard didn't respond. He was watching Claire, the straight line of her back, the confident set of her shoulders, the way other people instinctively moved out of her path. His expression was unreadable,
a complex mixture of emotions that even he, with all his legal training and maintaining a poker face, couldn't fully control. In the reflection of the window glass, with the setting sun painting the sky in shades of amber and gold, Richard Cohen saw something he had never seen before: the shadow of a man who had missed the most important story of his life because he had been too busy writing his own. And as the last rays of daylight slipped beneath the horizon, that shadow grew longer and darker and heavier with each passing moment. Chapter 3. The Sky Between Us. When Claire returned to the table 15 minutes later, something had shifted in her demeanor. Her earlier composed facade had softened slightly, revealing a glimpse of the weight she carried, not just the stars on her shoulders, but the years of silence between her and the two people who should have known her best. "Everything all right?" Eleanor asked tentatively, as though speaking to a stranger. Claire nodded. "Just a routine check-in." She settled back into her seat, glancing at the departure board visible through the lounge windows. "Our flight board's in 30 minutes. The announcement hung in the air, a reminder that soon they would be confined together in an aircraft for over 5 hours, flying to New York for a Christmas that none of them had anticipated would unfold this way. Richard had barely touched his second scotch. His legal mind was still processing, assembling facts, seeking the pattern that would make sense of this new reality. "Nuclear deterrence," he said suddenly, the words sounding foreign on his tongue. "That's what you said you specialized in?" Claire's eyes met his. "Yes. And you command—" He faltered, still struggling with the concept. "Currently, I oversee a specialized joint task force," Claire explained, her voice slipping into what her colleagues called her briefing tone: clear, precise, patient. "Before that, I commanded the USS Michael Murphy, destroyer, Arleigh Burt class." Eleanor leaned forward. "But Claire, how could you— you were always so—" She gestured vaguely with her manicured hands. "Quiet? Unremarkable?" Claire supplied. Eleanor flinched. "Or perhaps," Claire continued gently, "you just weren't looking." A server approached with a discreet cough. "Admiral Cohen, we've prepared some dinner if you'd care for it before your flight." Claire thanked him, and soon their table held a spread of elegant small plates. As they ate in awkward silence, the sun fully set outside, the tarmac transforming into a constellation of runway lights. "When did you decide?" Richard finally asked, his hoarse voice. "The Navy. When did you decide that was what you wanted?" "My commissioning ceremony," Claire explained. 2013. Eleanor touched the plastic-covered photo with trembling fingers. "You look so young." Claire turned the page. Another photo. Claire on the deck of a ship, the ocean stretching endlessly behind her. Lieutenant spars now on her shoulders. Then another, in combat fatigues somewhere dusty and foreign. Then in dress blues, receiving a medal from a stern-faced admiral. With each turn of the page, Richard and Eleanor Cohen witnessed the life their daughter had built without them. A life of purpose, responsibility, and hard-earned respect. The final photo showed Claire on the bridge of a destroyer, captain's eagles on her shoulders, surrounded by her crew. Unlike the formal poses of earlier photos, this one captured a moment of genuine connection. Claire mid-laugh, her officers smiling around her, the camaraderie of people who had faced danger together evident in their easy proximity. "My team on the Murphy," Claire said, her voice warming with genuine affection. "Best crew in the Pacific Fleet." Eleanor wiped fresh tears. "They look like they adore you." Claire closed the album gently. "We went through a lot together." The departure board updated. Their flight was now boarding. Around them, the lounge had begun to empty as passengers made their way to their gates. "We should go," Claire said, returning the album to her backpack and standing. The naval officers stationed nearby immediately straightened. As they gathered their belongings, Richard cleared his throat. "Claire, Admiral Cohen," interrupted Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez, approaching with crisp efficiency. "Ma'am, there's been a change of plans. Fleet Command is requesting your presence at a briefing in Pearl Harbor. There's a Navy transport standing by to take you to Coronado, where you'll connect with a military flight to Hawaii." Claire frowned slightly. "Now? It's Christmas Eve." "Yes, ma'am. Admiral Westfield sends his personal apologies, but says it's urgent. Something about the situation we discussed last month." Understanding flickered in Claire's eyes. She nodded once. "I see." She turned to her parents, her expression a complex mixture of regret and resolution. "I'm sorry. It seems I won't be joining you in New York after all." Eleanor's face fell. "But it's Christmas." For a brief moment, Claire was torn, the dutiful daughter and the dedicated officer in silent conflict. Then, her posture straightened almost imperceptibly. Decision made. "Duty calls, Mom," she said gently. "Some things can't wait, even for holidays." Richard stepped forward, uncharacteristic uncertainty in his movement. "Will you be safe?" The question seemed to surprise Claire. It was perhaps the first time in her adult life that her father had expressed concern for her well-being, not her accomplishments, not her behavior, but her safety. "I'm good at my job, Dad," she said simply. Then, seeing something in his eyes, she added, "But yes, I'll be careful." Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez waited discreetly nearby, the weight of national security hanging silently between them. "I should go," Claire said. Eleanor moved forward suddenly, embracing her daughter with an awkward intensity. "We never knew," she whispered. "All these years, we never knew who you really were." Claire returned the embrace gently. "Maybe next time," she suggested, "you could ask." When Eleanor released her, Richard Cohen stood stiffly, clearly uncomfortable with the public display of emotion. He extended his hand formally, as though concluding a business meeting. Claire looked at the offered hand for a moment, then stepped forward and embraced her father instead. He stood frozen for a second before his arm slowly, hesitantly, came around her. "I'm sorry," he whispered, so quietly that only she could hear. "I'm so sorry, Claire." She stepped back, meeting his eyes. "I know, Dad." Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez cleared her throat discreetly. "Admiral, we need to depart." Claire nodded, picking up her battered backpack. "My parents will need assistance with their connection to New York," she told Rodriguez. "Please ensure they're escorted to their gate." "Of course, ma'am." Claire turned to her parents one last time. "Merry Christmas," she said. "I'll call when I can." As she walked away, following Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez toward whatever national security crisis required her attention on Christmas Eve, Richard Cohen called after her. "Claire." She paused, looking back. Richard stood straighter, his voice carrying clearly across the now quiet lounge. "We're proud of you," he said. "I'm sorry it took us so long to see what was right in front of us." Claire didn't respond immediately. In the gleaming window glass behind her parents, she could see her reflection, not the overlooked daughter or the invisible child, but the woman she had become, Rear Admiral Claire Cohen, 2 stars on her shoulders, and a lifetime of earned respect in her bearing. "Thank you," she said finally. "That means more than you know." As she disappeared through the secure exit, escorted by naval personnel who clearly held her in the highest regard, Richard and Eleanor Cohen remained standing in the emptying Admiral's lounge, surrounded by the remnants of their shattered assumptions and the first fragile foundations of a new understanding.
Lounged, surrounded by the remnants of their shattered assumptions and the first fragile foundations of a new understanding. Outside the massive windows, a military helicopter descended onto a restricted section of the tarmac, its blades slicing purposefully through the night air.
Within minutes, it would carry their daughter. Not the disappointing, underachieving Claire they had dismissed for years, but Rear Admiral Cohen, whose importance was so great that even Christmas Eve couldn't wait for her decisions. Eleanor slipped her hand into Richard's, a gesture of shared regret and belated pride. "Did you ever imagine," she whispered, "that our daughter would become someone so essential?" Richard shook his head slowly, watching as the helicopter's door opened, waiting for the woman they had never truly known until today. "No," he admitted quietly. "I never imagined she could be anything more than what I expected her to be." He turned to his wife, his eyes damp with uncharacteristic emotion. "That was my greatest failure." As the helicopter lifted into the night sky, carrying Claire toward her duty and her purpose, the stars above San Diego seemed to shine a little brighter. Distant points of light that had always been there, waiting to be seen by those who took the time to look up. And so concludes our story of recognition, respect, and the quiet power of living authentically. The journey Claire took, from the invisible daughter to the respected admiral, reminds us that our worth isn't determined by those who fail to see it, but by the path we choose and the lives we touch along the way. Did this story resonate with you? Have you ever been underestimated by those who should have believed in you most? Subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories of triumph, redemption, and the courage to become who you're meant to be, even when others can't see it yet. Your subscription helps us continue creating content that celebrates the strength and resilience of women who have forged their own paths, despite the doubts of others. Click that subscribe button now and join our community of storytellers and truth seekers.
Claire set down her fork, considering the question. "I was 16, she said finally. Career day at school. A female commander gave a presentation. She talked about service, purpose, protecting something larger than yourself." A small smile touched her lips. She had this presence, like gravity had a different effect on her than everyone else. Eleanor frowned. 16? But you never mentioned— "I did," Claire interrupted, a rare edge entering her voice. "At dinner that night, you were discussing the Henderson wedding. Dad was on a conference call. I said I'd met someone from the Navy who'd inspired me." She picked up her water glass. "Mom, you said, 'That's nice, dear,' without looking up from your planner." Eleanor's face crumpled. "I don't remember." "That's rather the point," Claire said softly. Richard's jaw worked back and forth. "So this is some sort of revenge, a decade-long scheme to make us feel guilty for not paying enough attention to your teenage whims?" Claire looked at her father for a long moment, her expression not angry, but something sadder, more final. "Dad, not everything is about you." Richard recoiled as if slapped. "I didn't join the Navy to spite you. I didn't earn my commission to prove you wrong. I didn't accept my promotions to make you feel guilty." Claire's voice remained level, but her eyes were intense. "I did those things because I found something I believed in, something that believed in me too." Eleanor dabbed at her eyes. "But sweetheart, why didn't you insist we listen? Why didn't you make us understand?" Claire's expression softened. "Mom, I was never going to be the daughter who demanded attention. That wasn't me. But that didn't mean I didn't have dreams, ambitions, things that mattered to me." Richard's legal training had taught him to recognize when he was losing a case. His face showed the first signs of genuine regret. "We missed it all. Your graduation, your commissioning, your promotions." "Yes," Claire acknowledged, without accusation, "you did." An uncomfortable silence fell again, punctuated only by the muted airport announcements and distant conversations of other travelers. "I have photos," Claire said suddenly, reaching for her worn backpack, "if you'd like to see them." From the depths of her bag, she withdrew a small leather-bound album, not digital photos on a phone, but actual printed photographs, preserved carefully despite years of deployments and transfers. Eleanor moved closer as Claire opened the album.
The first photo showed a much younger Claire in her dress whites, the gold ensign bar gleaming on her shoulder, her face solemn but her eyes bright with promise.